Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. Land of the Thunder Dragon, Discover the Kingdom of Bhutan. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leaders, Conan, Dumenil, and Dorji. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Over to you, Conan.
Thank you, Rob. I love the intro. I think you have the perfect voice for a voiceover, Rob. Good career choice, I think, calling there. But thank you to all our viewers again for joining us for yet another session. Now, you may wonder about the title. And, in the subcontinent or most parts of Asia, a lot of no conversation of any merit is complete without copious quantities of chai. The chai here, the tea, varieties of tea are as diverse as the people themselves. And while I'm sitting here, sipping on a cup of Himalayan green tea, join us with me and my colleague and compadre Dorji as we take you through this virtual journey where you discover, well, we're hoping to condense a lot of information about Bhutan on this little virtual discovery of yours. So may I present Dorji as well.
Thank you, Conan.
Okay, so
I'm Dorji. Yeah.
Sorry, Dorji, there's a bit of lag going.
Okay.
Yeah. So, folks, Bhutan is an interesting place, and it is one of the places where we run our trips. NatHab runs our trips in winters. And while Dorji is from Bhutan, it's such a pleasure to have him here. I've been guiding as well in Bhutan for a couple of seasons now, and I've spent a lot of time exploring the Eastern Himalayas there. So our Bhutan team is a fun-loving team, as you can see in some of the pictures here. It's a great trip where not only do we visit some of the country's most beautiful natural sites, but we also get to experience a part of its vibrant and yet and unique culture as well. And as you can see also from here, there's plenty of photo ops, and you have a great team that supports you on this travel. It's one half of our Himalayan adventure that takes place between Nepal and Bhutan. So what are we going to talk about today? Yeah, I know the title sounds very catchy, and especially when Rob says it like that. And so what we're doing is a little intro into what Bhutan has to offer and what you would see when you visit this part of the world. And so again, it's great. It's a great pleasure to have our Bhutan guide with us, Dorji. And Dorji, before we get going, I know we've already had a question from someone about what your name means, and we're going to be talking about names very shortly. So could you go ahead and tell us that, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dorji, and Dorji means a thunderbolt. So it's
That's
actually
such a cool
very
name.
common name. Yes. So it's a very common name in our country because all the names are actually connected with Buddhism. So Dorji means thunderbolt once again. And I mean, like a lot of people, when we are born, we are taken to a temple, to a master, or to a monastery. So whatever they choose the name. So that's actually our name. So because of that reason, I think we will have hundreds of Dorji in Bhutan.
Thanks, Dorji. But you, ladies and gentlemen, he's downplaying that a lot, but he is truly special. So let's get started. And as we would say in Bhutan, Kuzu Zankola, that means welcome, and let's get started. So I think the first thing I got to ask here, Dorji, to you is, we were talking about names, but, Bhutan itself, when you look at, one of the theories of the name is that it goes, as Bhutan, as being sort of the southern end of Tibet, and it's got its roots in Tibetan folklore and history. But then, as locals, you know it very differently, don't you? You have a different name
Yes.
for your country locally.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I mean, like Bhutan actually have been called with many different names over the period and time. So they were like, for example, we have like names like Tojong Minjong, which means the southern country of medicinal herbs, because in Bhutan we have a very healthy ecosystem. Because of that reason, I mean, like we have about 600 different medicinal plants. For that reason, we were also once called as Tojong Minjong. And we were also called Shangri-La, or the last Shangri-La. But I mean, Bhutan actually it's used to call as Bhutan, which meant, I mean, highland. So that's how it became Bhutan. But so many people outside of Bhutan, they call our country as Bhutan, but we actually call our country as Druk Yil. Druk Yil means the land of the thunder dragon. So Druk is a dragon, Yul is a country, so the land of the thunder dragon. So the name has to, it is actually connected with our principal sect of religion that we practice in our country, which is called as Drupakajuk. So around 12th century, there was a great master called Sampajere Ishidoji. So when he actually founded this, the sect of Buddhism, so he was actually meditating in one of the cave. So he actually, when he found this sect of religion, so he needed a name. So he was meditating inside the cave. At the same time, he heard a thunder in the sky. And at the same time, a rosary broke and it scattered towards southward. So it was an indication that his sect of Buddhism that was going to flourish south of Tibet, which was Bhutan. So as that sect of Buddhism, when it arrived in Bhutan, so because of that reason, our people decided to call our country as a Drukgyal, so the land of the thunder dragon.
That's such a fantastic origin story, Dorji, and it reminds me of that, 2 weeks ago when, ladies and gents who are listening in, 2 weeks ago when Dorji and I started working on this presentation, our very first meeting, which we sort of did an online call, and as we were working on our very first slide, believe it or not, there was a clap of thunder just outside my window. And I was like,
Yes.
that is time.
Yeah, I still remember that.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about dragons a little bit more. I mean, first of all, yes, they're cool.
Yes.
What's not about dragons? But in Bhutan, you see them everywhere. Whether it's in the architecture, it's on your national carrier, it's there in everyone's houses in some form or the other. And I think for me as a visitor, it's sort of reflective of how deeply ingrained this philosophy of the dragon and the origin is in everyday life. And I don't know if it compares to any other country where we carry our national emblem with such pride and so deeply ingrained.
Well, I would say like I'd like to just as an example take the bald eagle, especially that's the emblem of America. So so it actually symbolizes the strength and freedom for them, if I'm not wrong. And in Bhutan, I mean, because the principal sect, the Drupakajuk, the dragon, but the dragon also symbolizes the enlightenment. And they are also considered as the guardians, the protector of the teaching of the Buddha. So because of that reason, you get to see the dragons everywhere, on the roof of the buildings, the monasteries, the Zong temples, and especially on the flags, and even on the entrance of the many places. So they actually are the protectors. So they actually protect us from all these negative energies and evil forces, which actually tries to affect and harm, or I would say harm the Buddha Dharma. So that's the reason that we have the dragons everywhere.
Yeah, that's so cool. Enlightenment and protection that made them even cooler. So,
Yeah.
All right, so let's just get our bearings before we proceed any further. So where is Bhutan? So for the uninitiated, it is this small landlocked country, nestled really nicely in the Himalayas, but also between two large neighbors as well, one a superpower and one an emerging superpower. And I think over the years, there's always been a lot of friendly and sometimes not so friendly overtures from both these large neighbors onto Bhutan and to, but they've always shared, and I think this probably comes, and we talk about this later. This comes from its deep-rooted beliefs in Buddhism of maintaining peace and harmony. But they've always shared a cordial relationship. And I'm from India, folks, and India and Bhutan strategically have always had very friendly relationships, and there's a lot of cooperation in the sphere of economics and development. So moving aside of the political sphere, that's just to give you a perspective of geographically where Bhutan is and what the outlying areas look like. So it is, again, it's a small landmass, it is landlocked, and it's located in this mighty range, the Himalayas, which are the tallest range on the planet. And apart from that, there's also the very influential Tibetan plateau and the Karakoram and the Hindu Kush range. It all sort of meets at the crossroads here in Central Asia, and Bhutan just lies east of it. But Dorji, you were telling me something earlier about being small, but all right, sorry, we lost Dorji for a second. I'll just catch up there. Dorji was telling me earlier, folks, that Bhutan may be small, but it plays a very significant role in affecting the regional climate. Yes, so Bhutan, yes, we all know, and it's renowned for its natural beauty, its the mountains, the rivers, and also its immense forest cover, which a large part of the country is covered by forests, and it acts as a massive carbon sink. And when you look at sort of the larger picture of the Himalayas and the importance, and we'll take you through the next couple of slides, just want to highlight how important it is, or how important that landscape plays in the sort of the larger role of Asia. So let's take a few steps back to a few million years ago and where it all began. So geographically, if you look at the Himalayas, I said yes, they're young, full mountains. They are also the tallest mountains and still growing. And so about 60 odd million years ago, the continental mass of India broke away and started drifting up, and where it collided with the Eurasian plate. And this collision created the Himalayas. So imagine it as a sheet of paper being pushed from both sides, and then you have these mountains rising up. And the plates are still moving. So the Himalayas today still is a seismic zone. They're still moving, which is why they're also still growing by a few centimeters every few years when they survey. Now, but it's easy to imagine the Himalayas, as being snow caps and covered by snow through the year around. Yes, they have a lot of snow peaks and glaciers and all of that, but there is still a large range or a large part of the Himalayas, the foothills or the outlying hills, and the map there on the right will give you some sort of a 3D perspective, and that's what it is about. And that's probably one of the most significant parts are these green foothills, which Bhutan occupies a large chunk of, and these foothills play a very important role in the region's climatic conditions. So if you've heard of the word monsoons, the monsoons are a very, very important period. Most of the subcontinent doesn't go through the 4 seasons as a lot of the northern hemisphere does, even though we are located in the northern hemisphere and close to the tropics, very tropical. But the Himalayas, the foothills of the Himalayas play an important role in catching the monsoon. So you're left with this huge green belt on the southern side of the Himalayas, which is forested. People that live there undertake a lot of agriculture, and then just south of these forested hills are the great floodplains of the Brahmaputra, the Indus, and the Ganges, some of the biggest rivers in the world. And this is just part of a larger system where Dorji, you can step in here and tell us what we were talking about earlier about the third pole.
Oh, yeah. So the third pole, which we call it the Hindu Kush, which actually stretches about 800 kilometers, and it has the third highest deposit of ice. And we have like, it covers about the 8 countries, which are Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, Nepal. We have Bangladesh, Myanmar, and our country Bhutan. And especially like it, we have about 240 million people living there. And it is also the source of the 8 major rivers which flows for the south. So it's actually one of the very crucial, or I would say very important, the water source of so many the peoples, which actually provides a lot of water for drinking and for agriculture. And I mean, like Bhutan itself, we have like about 270, 2,700 lakes. So just imagine, especially in this vast area, how many lakes probably will be there. And I mean, this the third pole is also considered as the water tower of Asia. So we actually are actually a bit worried, especially like we always have been like talking about the global warming, and we believe, or many people say that, okay, if the rise in temperature of 1.5 centigrade, I think probably we'll lose 1/3 of the ice of the Hindu Kush. So if that happens, I mean, that's one of the biggest threat to us. And I mean, like it can affect Bhutan, I mean, in a very, very dangerous way. I mean, the valleys will be washed.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easy to think that right? And
Yeah.
I mean, because it's what is that the ice caps outside the polar regions, and you know, it's also just to reflect the folks and why we're talking about this here is that you know, change elsewhere in the world does affect the region as well. Now, you know, just to put that visual there for you. It's been wonderful that we spoke about the country's natural beauty, as you mentioned, Dorji. It's a great place, and we are really privileged to to having spent some time to come and visit. But it wasn't always a place that was open, was it? And tourism is a fairly new phenomenon in Bhutan.
Yes, Conan. I mean, like Bhutan actually opened tourism, especially around 1974, coinciding the coronation of our former king, the king number 4. Before that, I mean, like we did not have any tourists visiting Bhutan. One reason, I mean, like Bhutan was completely isolated from the rest of the world till 1960s, and we didn't have like any proper infrastructure for the travelers to stay in. And especially during 1974, I mean, when our government decided to open to the rest of the world and started bringing in tourists, I mean, we had about 380 Americans who visited Bhutan for the very first time. They were more of the adventurers, I mean, the trackers. They enjoyed hiking, spent nights in the tents, the farmhouses. But at the same time, we also had a lot of dignitaries, VVIPs, who visited Bhutan for the coronation of our the former king. But I mean, like when we opened the tourism to the outside world, I mean, we actually had to keep one thing in mind. I mean, like we actually thought like, okay, we don't want to overrun the tourism in our country, because Bhutan actually had the opportunity to learn from other countries' mistake. So we actually thought of like having a policy which actually protected our the cultural heritage. So they came up with the idea or the policy called high value, low impact. So they decided to bring in very high quality tourists and least impact on our the cultural heritage and environment.
Yeah, so the number of tourists are still restricted, and which is why we also apply in advance, right, until date, to have that peek into this beautiful landscape that we're looking in. I beg your pardon. There's a couple of pictures here which I thought were very significant that I threw at one of course is in the early 1900s where King again Wangchuk was knighted or received the order of the Knight Commander of the British Indian Empire, and the other one was more significant to modern times. And again, I put it there just to highlight the friendship that India and Bhutan shares. And this was the visit of the first international dignitary to Bhutan was the then Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, who was India's first Prime Minister, was also the first dignitary to visit Bhutan on a state visit. And it came at a point that was strategic. It was post World War II. There were growing influences of power around the world, and India felt, and this was a treaty very early signed, a treaty based on friendship and not economic interests or exerting a sphere of influence, but it was treaty based on friendship. And I think this picture here, the Prime Minister and his young daughter, Indira Gandhi, would then become a following Prime Minister in India. And I think that's the picture of them looking back. And there was no infrastructure, so they actually rode in on yaks. And then, of course, when they were met by royalty, it was shifted to horses. Which brings me to my next question, Dorji, and I don't think I've asked you this before. You spoke about Bhutan opening up, right? What was it for you growing up and experiencing sort of new improvements or sort of rather new technology, so to speak, talking about television, internet, road, cars? What was it for you?
It's actually like it's been like quite exciting journey for me. I mean, like growing up, I mean, like Bhutan actually. These are actually like the fun facts. Bhutan actually is the very last country to switch on the television in the year 1999. Following that year, the internet followed, and around 2003, the cell phones. So yeah, almost a lot of things actually was happening like one after another. So for me, I mean, like I was like born and raised in Thimphu, which is the capital, the city of Bhutan. And one very interesting fact about Thimphu is Thimphu is the world's only capital without traffic light. Even today, we don't have traffic lights. Still, the heart of the city is controlled by the traffic policemen. So I mean, like for me, I mean, like as a young boy, I mean, we had so many, I mean, fun. We had like, we never were restricted. We always had a time with friends, families, sitting down with our grandparents, listening to the stories, this to share. But I mean, like after the introduction of all things like globalization, I mean, things have changed slowly in our country too. Now most of the younger generation, they don't spend much of their time with their family, the parents. I mean, the storytelling has completely disappeared. I would say not many people, I mean, the grandparents would sit next to the grandkids, and then they'll never share the stories. I mean, like the grandparents, they always love to spend times with them, but the younger generation, they are with the cell phones, so they don't have time to spend with their grandparents. So these little things are actually something that I always had the opportunity to go through. And I mean, like the Bhutan, sorry. So the
I said that
Bhutan, uh-huh. So Bhutan actually, we actually got our very first road during 1960 to 1961, which actually stretched about 80 miles from our capital, connecting the Indian border called Pinsiling, which is a commercial town in West Bengal. And we got our first car 1962. So I mean, like our parents used to share stories saying that, oh, when they saw the first car, they were really scared to see this iron beast. And some people, they even tried feeding this car with the freshly collected grass they just brought and then like place it right in front of the car. So some people even ran off, I mean, saying that, oh, this is very strange looking the beast. So these are actually like very interesting stories that our parents used to share. But I mean, like by the time I grew up, I mean, like we have a lot of the Indian Jeep, the bus, trucks. But now, I mean, like we have so many the fancy cars in our country, but very common ones are the Hyundai and Kia Motors. And obviously, yes, we
Yeah,
have lots of Toyota too.
yeah. I just want to say, Dorji, when you're speaking about cars, one of the first things that sort of struck me as a first-time visitor to Bhutan was how nice the cars were. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
country of SUVs, I'd say. Thanks to the terrain, there's a lot of really nice cars around. And the other thing that kind of piqued my attention there was that we spoke about, or rather, you told us about, that taking that step into the modern age, embracing technology, and everything else that comes with it. But what grasped my attention was, in spite of all these modern advancements, with the roads and the cars and some, with development and progress that happens, there is still, at least to me, seemed to be a deep connection still with the culture. And here we've got a picture of an office building here, and I've never seen an office
Mhm.
building look so nice. And when you look at your costumes and clothes, uh, a lot of people still seem to enjoy wearing the traditional clothes. So, while the country is moving forward and embracing modernity, there always seems to be this deep attachment to your tradition.
I've been like, especially like our culture is deeply rooted with Buddhism. So, I mean, like most of the, I would say like 75% of the population in our country, we are Buddhists, and especially like it's very simple living, and especially with the modernization. I mean, like even though Bhutan being a Buddhist country, I mean, some, I mean, like anyhow, we have to get there. So it's a part of life. So I mean, like in bigger towns, especially like in Thimphu, Paro, Punakha, so most of these traditional buildings, of the traditional houses in our country, which is actually built from rammed earth, have been replaced by modern concrete buildings. But our government have a very strict policy saying that, okay, we have to protect the architectural designs of all the buildings. So even though you build big buildings in different areas, you have to have a traditional touch, a lot of paintings. So like we discussed about the dragons, the painting of different the protectors. So you see a lot of paintings on the buildings too. And I mean, like we always have celebrated our national costume. For men, we call it the go, and for ladies, we call it kira. And I mean, like our ladies, especially, they wear beautiful colored dress. And likewise, I mean, likewise, the ladies, we also wear very bright, colorful the goes. So, but I mean, like we always I mean, I feel like in Bhutan, it's just the other way around. In the Western world, the ladies get to show their legs, but in Bhutan, the mans get to show their legs instead of the ladies. So the girls, I mean, the ladies in our country, they are a bit shy, so they cover everything from top to bottom. But the men in our country, we are like, okay, let's show our legs. But I mean, like, and I mean, like, we have the biggest pocket in the world. So especially like I'm wearing a go. So actually our pocket starts from here. It goes all the way and comes out from here. So I mean, like anything can go inside. It's like a den. You can put it inside, like books, cell phone, like even the laptops, and especially sometimes you can put your babies inside. I mean, like if you don't have anything to carry him or her, so you just put it inside the pocket and just go around.
Yeah. And having worn one, ladies and gents, it is super comfortable. And as you can see, on every trip, we dress up at least for one night, where we get all our travelers to wear, with help, of course. Figuring that out on your own is quite a challenge, but with help, we figure out and we play dress up for one night, and it's comfortable. Thanks for sharing about the dress, Dorji. Um, you want to talk to us a little bit about food? I mean, what's going
Oh,
on with those chilies there, man? We have to talk about the
oh,
chilies.
believe me, I mean, like Bhutan being a Himalaya country, which is actually located in the eastern part of the Himalayas. So, I mean, in olden times, I mean, it was really cold. So the people actually, to stay away from the cold, I mean, they ate a lot of chilies. So we in our country, we produce about 13,000 megawatts, thousands of the tons of chilies annually. And that's not enough. We import more. So that's a lot of chili in our country. So chili in our country is like an appetizer. I mean, without chili, we will always say, I want to skip my meal. So everything, I mean, everything we cook, like chili cheese, which is the national dish. We call it the chili cheese or emadati. And we have like potato cheese, but a lot of chili. I mean, like all the time. So yes, we eat a lot of chili. So it actually helped keep away the cold. So that I think that was the main reason we actually started consuming a lot of chili. But I mean, like once you get used to it, you'll love it. Uh, Definitely,
Yeah, I
yes. I mean,
completely
Conan, I think, yeah,
feel that.
you have already tried, so you know how it is.
Oh yes, oh yes, I absolutely love it. And I think what Bhutan also has, and also excites me, is the whole culture around brewing. And I suppose when you consume that amount of chilies, you need something to wash it down. And I know you told me earlier, and we've seen as well, and we look at it on some of our on our trips. There is a culture of home brewing that happens at home. Usually, it's barley or millet based,
Right.
a wine or a beer that's still made in a lot of farmhouses in the rural areas. And I think on my last visit there, hold on. On my last visit there, I brought back this. Now, it's nice to see the brewing culture take a step into the modern world as well. And today it's, I mean, there's a variety of beers. I think this was a red rice beer that is made in Bhutan. And unfortunately, only allowed to bring 2 bottles back in customs. So that's one of the bottles that I've saved from last year. But it's such I mean, the culture around food and drink, and some bits, especially when we visit the rural areas, it's such a communal thing. It's a family gathering, and it's just this warm feeling, not from the chilies, but it's just this warmth that exudes from households and these little family-run restaurants. And the other thing that's also gets that people going, especially on weekends, is that, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yes. So the rice wine is very popular. I mean, like because like 75% of the population in our country, they do small scale farming. So the farming in mountainous country, it has always been about backbreaking work. So especially our parents, they always preferred a huge mug of the rice wine, like every evening or in the middle of the day. So yeah, I mean, because of that reason, yes, the wine it's always been a part of the people in our country. And the archery actually, which is our national
After
sport.
the wine.
Uh, yes, and this is one sport in Bhutan where sport and wine go hand in hand. So especially like so many people, they actually drink a lot, and sometimes it can get really dangerous. I mean, but most of the archers, they say that okay, when they drink more, they get a little bit steady and the confidence level goes a little bit higher. But I'm not that sure about it because I've never tried, so it's a bit scary too. So especially like the archery in our country is played at the range of 150-meter with like 11 shooter from each team. They shoot a pair of arrow, and I mean like it's one of the best the times that they would like spend during that archery tournaments. I mean like they'll do a lot of trash talking, but with a lot of humor. I mean like they will go back and forth. I mean it's very interesting. I mean like so especially like the archery was something that they always organize, especially during the fall seasons when they don't have any work in the farms. So it's very exciting, I mean, to play archery, but
Yeah.
I have never tried. Yeah, I mean, like in some occasions, I mean, like when we lead the group towards the end, we visit a farmhouse and then we demonstrate the archery, but we don't do like 150-meter. We do about 30-meter. So at the second slide, we showed some pictures. So I mean, like after a couple of the rice wine, the Conan, he actually volunteered as a target, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take my prize. But he was like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
And I mean, very interestingly, I mean, every hit is celebrated with a song and a dance. So I mean, like, yeah, we have like people whenever they hit the target, they would like start singing, dancing. So yeah, every hit is celebrated. So that becomes, I mean, that adds more charm to the sport.
Yeah, there's such a vibrancy around these little events and pastimes that we have, and it's easy to think being a small country, it's easy to think that it's just homogeneous throughout, but that isn't the case, isn't it? It's Bhutan has a fair diversity in ethnicities as well. We're looking at human migrations and how they came into the country as well. I'm just going to throw up something there. And this is, when you look at the map, it's, evident. And these are groups of people that have come throughout history and settled in Bhutan. And as you can see, and if you kind of superimpose this with, the terrain map which you saw earlier, it's very evident that as each wave of people or population moved about, they kind of settled in a homogeneous area together. So there are groups of people, as modern migration sometimes work with cities as well. You find someone of your tribe and you settle close to them. So you have this congregation of people across, and often a lot of this in the Himalayan region is based on what agriculture, what crops they grow. So you find a valley if you're someone who is um, expert expertise lie in growing a particular crop, like say barley, you'll find a valley that provides you that uh, those resources. Or if you're someone who likes farming out in the in the lowlands, things like rice and wheat, and living off the freshwater systems, then you would settle down in the sort of flatter areas. So we look at how populations move around, and that's what's evident from these maps here. And then but there is also, though you were talking us about rural population and some of this, could you shed some light on the different kinds of people or the different communities found in Bhutan?
Yes, so especially like Bhutan, actually, like coming back to Bhutan, actually, it's a tiny kingdom which is actually tucked away in the Himalayas, and it actually covers about 40,000 square kilometer roughly, and we have about 750,000 people. So especially like it's very small country with a very small population. Even though I mean like in our country, about 23 different dialects are spoken throughout Bhutan, and from like from which like 16 is native to Bhutan, and Dzongkha is our official language. So Dzong is a fortress, Kha means language. So the language from the fortress is the official language in our country. And I mean, like we have like three major ethnic groups in our country. So we have like the Ngolops, which are the descendant of Tibetan, the Mongols. And towards the eastward, we have the Shashos. They are the most dominant ethnic group in our country, who were the immigrant of from the neighboring state called Arunachal Pradesh, which is a part of India. And towards the southern belt, we have a lot of Nepalese, which are the immigrants from the Nepal from the 1960s. So if you look at some of these pictures, you can see the elderly man with the grayish hair. They are called as the Bropas. The Bropas are actually the nomads. So they are actually like the Highlanders. So their livelihood completely depends on yak. So the majority of the lower valleys, central and the lower valleys, actually the people are settled in there. They do a small scale the farming. So they grow rice, the millet, the potatoes, which are the cash crops, the cardamom, and the northern part. I mean, it's all the nomads. We have the Bropas and the Layabs.
Wow. Wow. So when you look at it, putting it into the modern world, the distinction, I come from India where we have it's a large country. The states are large. Sometimes the administrative line is very, very long and tedious sometimes. But, how does it work in a small country like Bhutan? I see you have 20 districts or divisions in the country as well, and you have it has what is now a constitutional monarchy, and that's an interesting story in itself, how it moved from a monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. So we have the king, who's the head of the government, and then the prime minister, and then which is also governed by a council of ministers. So for me, again, coming from India, this was a very, very interesting thing to see, as I would imagine with a lot of our visitors, where well, the king is still active in a lot of government roles, but a lot of power is also attributed to the ministers as well. And that's Tashi Chojong. It doesn't roll off the tongue very easily. That's your seat of government, though.
Yeah, so that's actually Tashi Chezong, which we call it the fortress of a glorious region. So this fortress was built by our unifier called Shabdrung Namgyal around 1641, around mid 17th century. So the fortress in our country, actually, this was mainly used to house the monastic body and the offices too. So this actually, this fortress also houses the throne room and the office of our king.
And speaking of which, we cannot talk about Bhutan without mentioning the royal family and everything that they've done, and also most interestingly, at least for me, is at least you look at the last two kings, their progressive views on what, and were actually a very clear vision of where they want the country to go. And so, will you tell us about the current royal family, Dorji?
Yes,
The
I
current
mean, like, so our kings have always been very the far-sighted. I mean, like, they were the one actually who imposed the democracy in our country. I mean, we were absolutely monarchy for about 100 years, from 1907 till 2007. So, especially our king, he felt that this was the right time and the moment for us to enter into a new era. So our king, our former king, the king number 4, actually, he actually retired and gave his throne to his son. he actually abdicated, and then he also introduced the democracy in our country. I mean, like, we never asked for, or we never fought for it. It was our king who actually imposing that, okay, this is the right time for us to leap forward. And I mean, go ahead and then uh, go with the democracy. And that's how constitutional monarchy was introduced. And very interestingly, I mean, like some of the articles, especially to state one particularly, our kings at the age of 65, they have to abdicate. I mean, they have to retire. They cannot stay as a king beyond that age. And now
that's sorry, though, you carry on. You're saying now you're
so
king.
yeah, it's the king number 4. He actually became the king of Bhutan during 2008, and actually he actually has promised to guide us through. I mean, he actually have treated us like his the kids, the parents. So he has promised to, I mean, visit every corner of the country to understand and help the needy ones. So he have been traveling throughout Bhutan extensively. I mean, mountains, the rivers, nothing stopped him from meeting his people and understanding the problems and solving the problems. So especially during the COVID, I mean, like he have been traveling extensively throughout borders, making sure everything is all right. So we had a lot of pictures from of him actually hiking throughout the Himalayas. And I mean, like we have two very young the prince. One is called Jimmy Namgyal. The second son is called the Uge Wangchuk.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Dorji, you mentioned earlier about the fortresses, right? I think this is something truly unique to Bhutan. And you have these monasteries, but are also fortresses, and they're such spectacular structures to look at. And well, at least all the major cities, and I think all the district headquarters has one of them, right? And on our visit, when we travel with NatHab groups, we see 3 of them at least, and this is probably the most spectacular out of the lot. The one in Punakha, which is the Punakha Zong, which is on the banks of this river. There's a beautiful cantilever bridge to access it, and then once you're in there, it's just such a splendid monument. But you know, it's all another thing that sort of appealed to me. It's not something that it's easy to imagine royalty and palaces sort of being aloof from the subjects, but it's also when we visit here, we always see there are people there. So does it have a part to play in a person's everyday life? Is a question I'm asking here. A zong, what is its significance in a person's normal Bhutanese life?
Yeah, I mean, this particular zong actually it's called Pungthang Deshin Podrang, which means the palace of a great happiness, and it was built around 1637. So this is actually one of the most magnificent zong in our country, and it was the ancient capital of Bhutan. Thimphu became the capital of Bhutan only around 1960s, but before that, Punakha was the capital of Bhutan, and still is the winter capital of Bhutan. And especially like this fortress, I mean, even though it's built around 17th century, it is still very active. It is used as the headquarter of every region. I mean, like every fortress is used as a headquarter of the region. So we have actually the civil servants working inside the zongs. They start their work from 9 to 5, and after 5 they leave. But I mean, the monks are the only ones who stay inside the zong after nightfall. So, I mean, the interesting fact, I mean, even the ladies or the women are not allowed to stay inside the zong after nightfall. This always has to do with the monks. So they feel that the monks might get tempted and get a little bit of nausea. So for that reason, I mean, even if you're queen of Bhutan, they won't allow you to spend night inside the zong. So, and I mean, like, the people, especially like on a special occasions, like we see the zong just this slide, you can see a lot of people. So this actually picture was taken on a special occasions, on auspicious days. So on auspicious days, many people, they would visit the zongs. The zongs, they will contain a lot of temples. And people, they would go there to pay their the respect and to make the offerings. So we believe that by doing so, it will bring a lot of merit to the individuals. And to do it on that auspicious days, it will bring a double the merit.
Yeah, and if you're talking about monasteries, we cannot not mention the most famous one, perhaps, the Tiger's Nest.
Yes, there you go. I mean, this is the Tiger Nest, one of the most iconic and the most impressive the temples in our country. It's one of the most sacred temple, I would say, in the entire the country. So the tiger's nest means the tiger's lair or the tiger's the den. So around 8th century, we had a great master called the Guru Padmasambhava, who is also considered as the second Buddha. So it's believed that he actually manifested or transformed himself into one of the rapo form called Guru Doji Dolo, and his principal consort called Kanu Shogyo, she actually transformed herself into a flying tigress. So Guru riding upon the flying tigress, they flew from the northeast of Bhutan to the present site Tiger's Nest and subdued a lot of negative energies in that area. And Guru meditated inside that cave for about 3 months. And followed by, after he left, the great masters over the period, I mean, they also meditated there for a certain period of time. And the very first temple came to that site around 14th century. But around 17th century, when the power fell under our unifier, he decided to enlarge a bigger temple there during the second half of the 17th century. So it is actually located about 900 meters from the valley, and it's about 5 hours hike, one way up and down.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful hike. It takes you through some wonderful forests. We've had a lot of our travelers make it up all the way up to the top. And if you look at the insert picture there, it's literally perched on the side of this cliff, and it's about 3,500 meters in height. So, and this is the last thing we actually do on our itinerary in Bhutan. We sort of work through the week to build up that strength and stamina and actually do Tiger's Nest. And it really, I think, honestly cannot be described in words. But Dorji, we're talking about faith and philosophy and how integral it is in the practice of Buddhism, and the country, by and large, generally seems to be guided by a singular philosophy as well, and that's the pursuit of happiness, and it's a term that I think Bhutan has coined and made it its very own, of gross national happiness. And when I was looking up GNH, as we call it, one of the quotes that stood out to me was by the former king, King Jigme Singye Wangchuk, who said that gross national happiness is, or rather the pursuit of gross national happiness is more important than the gross national product as well. So could you tell us, as an everyday guy on the street, what does GNH sort of mean to you?
So actually, like the GNH, actually, it's the guiding philosophy of our country, especially for the development and the good governance, the preservation of the environment. So these are like the 4 pillars that we will see in the next slide. I mean, so I think all we need, I mean, like the most important thing in your life is to breathe pure air, water. We have that. And I mean, like we actually, under the leadership of the great Dharma kings, we never had to go through a lot of problems. I mean, they have always looked after us and taken care of us. And I mean, gross national happiness, I mean, we always say like the measure happiness, but I mean, it's not possible. But we have seen the 9 domains. This is actually, these 9 domains are actually the guiding domains, which actually helps the government to make the law according to these 9 domains. But from that 9 domains, there are like about 33 indicators which actually helps the Center for Bhutan Studies to do like survey, like one-on-one interview with every people. I mean, which takes about the questionnaire session goes for about 2 hours for one person. I mean, they have done this the survey in a few times, and they found out that the 92% of people they're happy. But I mean, like we say, we are the happiest country in the world. It might not be right. I mean, some people they might not be that happy, but I mean, like certainly, I mean, when they did this interview, I mean, they felt that quite the few people, I mean, they are happy in our country. So 92% is quite a good number. So
Wow, that's a lot. And what I'm seeing here is that there is an active role from the country's administration to be in touch with each of its citizens. And when you have a policy, or when you have a national policy that's driven by the well-being of the citizens, you really can't go wrong, can you? And at the center of all of this is we look at the conservation of the environment, and that's what brings us to this point. And I think why we also have a large, I mean, all our travelers are nature travelers at Natural Habitat Adventures, and this is why we all go out, and this is why we continue working, is to see beautiful spots of nature and experience it and sort of immerse ourselves in it. And what I'm seeing here is, while many countries are sort of struggling to reduce the carbon emissions, there's constant talk, there is negotiations that happen. Bhutan's already a country that's carbon negative, which means it takes out more greenhouse gases from the atmosphere that it actually puts in, right? And if you're looking at considering its area, which is roughly the size of the state of Maryland in the US, we have woodlands that cover close to about 70% of the country's area, and about 30% of these woodlands are protected by royal decree. And if you just sort of peek at the map, insert map, all of these woodlands, all of these protected areas, these forests are fairly connected to each other, and it encompasses the entire country. And what this does, it acts as a natural carbon sink, so it sort of absorbs the excess carbon dioxide that we're putting in. And again, I would like you to think about, back to the beginning of the slides where we spoke about how relevant this is in the overall Asian landscape, or the overall Himalayan landscape. I mean, a population of 750,000, which you have in Bhutan, and the country accounts for at least 3 times, or taking out 3 times as much as what the population is. And to think of another small country, and when I was doing some research, I found Luxembourg, which is similar, much smaller in size, but puts out 4 times as much carbon dioxide. So you can only imagine the big industrial countries and what it does. So just stepping away from that for a second, again, like to bring some visuals into your mind of what Bhutan, what the natural spaces of Bhutan are, and what the wildlife habitats are all about. It's not snow and mountains all the way through. There's high altitude grasslands, there's massive riverine systems, there's tropical forests, there's coniferous forests. So it's practically got a lot of the biomes, all of that packed into a small area. And what that does for the nature traveler is allow us to see a lot of different kinds of species, truly unique species to the landscape, like the Himalayan black bear. Now, normally one would not associate bears to the Asian landscape, but we have a few species, 6 species of bear, if I'm right. And the Himalayan black bear is truly one to see, living up in the wooded areas of the Himalayas. The monal, a truly spectacular bird, and the males have this wonderful display with their crest and the tail, which they do. It's just striking, and they live up near the snow line. And then we have, of course, the original fire fox or the bear cat, the red panda, which is sort of the symbol in a lot of Himalayan regions, of the state animal in a lot of Himalayan regions. And if you're lucky, you'll see them in really nice, moist, deciduous forests. But there's also another truly unique animal, which is your national animal, Dorji. You tell us about that.
The takin, right? Yes.
Yes.
So, so the takins, yes, they have a quite thick the neck, and it has very strong legs. So actually, like we actually have like we believe that it's a combination of the yak, the goat and a cow. And I mean, you can see it. I mean, so
sort of leftover from created, you see. All the spare parts that were left over. The legend goes.
The legend goes, I mean, like during the 15th century, there was a master called Pakinle. So he actually was the one who actually created the takin in our country.
Sorry, Dorji, did we wake up your little boy?
Yes. I'm really sorry. I mean, like, can you give me a second? I mean, like,
sure. Sure, no problem.
Okay.
I'll just yeah.
Yeah. So yes, coming back to talking.
Yeah.
So especially like in 15th century, there was this master called Pakinle. So he was actually loved by many people in the Himalayas. He was one of the craziest character in the entire Himalaya. I mean, like he used to dramatize his teaching through song, humor, outrageous behavior. He was alcoholic, womanizer. But I mean, like, because of his character, I mean, like many people, they loved him and respected him. They had a huge respect for him. So during 15th century, when he visited Bhutan, I mean, upon arriving in Punakha, there's a place called Lobesa. So when they actually like arrived there, so they offered him wine and paid their respect and insisted, saying that they wanted to see something magical. And after completing his wine, he asked to bring the whole cow and a goat to the people around him. So they brought the cow and a goat, and then presented him with the cow and goat, and he started feeding on the whole cow and a goat. And he just stacked all the bones at one side and grabbed the head of the goat and threw on the pile of the goat and commanded, saying that, "You strange looking beast, you don't have any skin on your body. Why don't you rise and graze upon this Himalayas?" So because it is connected with the mythology and the legend of our country, it was declared as the national animal of Bhutan. So even today, I mean, like, it is seen grazing upon the Himalayas, but they are actually migratory animals. So they actually migrate to Tibet, the south of Tibet, during the summer, and during winter they actually migrate to Bhutan. And this place here actually, it's a takin preserve, where we had like about 20 takins in this preserve. Once it was actually a zoo, but I mean, Bhutan, it didn't go very well with the reputation in our country, because Bhutan being a Buddhist country, it didn't go well, saying that, okay, Bhutan being Buddhist country, you have a zoo in your country. And our government felt that, oh, it was not that right to keep this animal behind the cages. So what they did was they did release all these animals from there, but somehow this the Takins, they were so used to this the area. I mean, they simply graze in that area, and it was actually quite dangerous for the people and the animal itself. So they decided to change the name and brought back all the animals, and then they decided to put them back there. So even today, I mean, like, you can still see the Takins in Thimphu at the Takin Preserve.
And this preserve has been a wonderful spot, and now it's also grown into a rescue and rehabilitation center for a lot of other
A lot of
ungulates as
different,
well,
yeah,
not just the,
lot of different animals. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So and which has been one of the proactive steps, I would say, that we've seen in Bhutan is, of course, its focus on conservation and understanding the biodiversity of land, and the importance of preserving them. And another conservation story that sort of comes to mind is the white-bellied heron. And it may not seem like much at first sight, but it's one of the largest herons in the world. And these are now extremely vulnerable, or they're critically endangered because of loss of habitat. And throughout most of the Asian region, uh, they have lost their habitat due to hydroelectric projects, because what the white-bellied heron really needs is pristine, fast-flowing streams. And when these rivers and streams get dammed up due to the hydro projects, they lose their habitat, and then the numbers drop drastically because there's no feeding or nesting space. But Bhutan is a country um, where we see the white-bellied heron. Is still rare to find. There's a fewer than a couple of hundred left all over Asia in the wild, but there is still. But it's heartening to see a thriving population up at Bhutan. And brings us to another bird also, which has an interesting story. Folks, I know we've kind of spilled over a bit, but Dorji, I'll let you quickly talk about uh, the cranes and what it means to you culturally as well, and from a conservation aspect, before we sign off from this webinar.
So especially like this one, this crane, we call it the black knee crane. It's one of the 15 cranes which are seen and found in the world. So they actually migrate from the Tibet to Bhutan around towards the end of the October. So they spend about 5 months in Bhutan. So there's a couple of few areas, I would say, where they migrate. But one of the dominant areas, or the most preferred area where they migrate, is Popjica Valley. It's a beautiful valley. It's a glacier valley, and it's one of the largest the wetlands in our country, in the western slope of Bhutan. Uh, so very interestingly, I mean, they also have a very important connection with the Buddhism in our country. And the people say that, I mean, like, when they migrate from Tibet, the first thing they would do is uh, there's a temple called Gangte. Gangte means Gang is a mountain, Te is a top, hilltop. So on this small mountain, right on the top, there's a temple. And the people living in that region, they always say that these cranes, when they fly from Tibet, when they migrate, the first thing they would do is fly straight towards the temple and circle this temple for 3 times, and then fly southwards towards the open valley. And same thing with the migration. I mean, back to Tibet. I mean, they would just fly straight towards the temple, and they would just circle, circle, circle. And when they reach the elevation when they want to fly, and then from there they would take off towards the North Tibet.
Yeah,
and I mean, like,
that's a
yeah,
fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking, the naturalist brain in me, and you being a naturalist as well, the first thing that, for a lot of our nature travelers, often a lot of this folklore and legend has some base in science, but just could not be explained probably articulately. But when you think about these cranes, how they fly over the high Himalayas at, 8,000 meters or just below that, they often rely on thermals. And I'm thinking here, these are the cranes looking for thermals on the mountaintop. As the wind heats up, they form these spirals. They latch onto one of these thermals and go straight across. But that's fantastic. But yeah, and there's a lot of efforts put into to conserving these species as well. They're protected not just by law, but I think the locals also see value in them. It is a sacred bird, so to speak. Right now, there are also annual festivals that are being organized to get people a little bit more on board. And here you see them mimicking the dance of the crane, which is held in one of the monasteries. And again, I think that's sort of been unique about Bhutan and its conservation successes, is how that it comes from a very strong base in Buddhist teachings, and then that has translated into the modern world and into environmental protection laws. And I think what probably is the most, at least in my opinion, the largest step is connecting all these national parks and these protected areas through this immense network of wildlife corridors across the country. And again, in my knowledge, I think it's one of the very few countries that actually are increasing its forest cover and not decreasing it due to development. So, and of course, this not only just augurs well for the country's well-being and its citizens, but also, like we have said time and time again during this this presentation, it does good for the region's balance and ecology as well. So folks, that I'm going to leave you with this last visual of this tiger that is caught on camera traps. This is a famous photograph by a photographer called Emmanuel Rondo, and he spent hours setting up this camera trap. And the reason why we're putting this here is we've seen, well, at least data has shown that these wildlife corridors that we were just talking about, that connects across the country, we've seen species such as these tiger move between them. So earlier what was thought was not viable tiger habitat or not viable for this species, but that species, but we've actually seen the same individual travel between these habitats, and that's only possible because of a national policy and a national determination in sort of understanding the value of its forests and creating more spaces. I know we've overspilled our time, but I'd like to thank you for joining in and waiting and listening to us. And as we say in Bhutan, Tashidalek, which means thank you. And Rob, we'll hand it over to you to hear if our viewers have any questions.
Thank you so much, Conan. We do have a couple of questions, so let's get right to them. So now, can you talk about what has been going on in Bhutan with COVID? Have they obtained vaccinations? How is it there?
Yeah, so especially like in Bhutan, we have actually about 2,600 cases so far. and we had about 3 casualties, and we just have about 7 active cases for now. I mean, and about 97% of our countries, the population has been vaccinated, both the dose. And our government, they actually tried something different. They wanted to, they did actually mix and match the vaccine, the 2 different vaccines. So we did the Moderna and AstraZeneca.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. So now, if I were to come visit you guys, is all the hiking and climbing very difficult? Would I be able to, if I had asthma, for instance, would I be okay? Can you talk about the physicality of the trip?
Oh,
I'm going to answer
well,
this one, Dorji, because you are a mountain man. You're not allowed to answer this one. You have your it is wired differently, man. But you know, as someone who's not from the mountains, folks, there's actually there's a logical progression to this trip. We start off small. In fact, the trip first starts in Nepal. We sort of get used to the landscape. We get used to everything around us, and then we go to Bhutan, and then we do short hikes in the lead-up days to the last. And like I said, you know, the hike, the toughest one is the one to Tiger's Nest, and that is on the last day when you've properly acclimatized and you've also built up the strength to do it. Now, having said that, as we would tell all our visitors on orientation dinner when we meet them the first day, is that there are support systems, there are rest stops on the way, there is a team of people that follow you up the hill. There's an option of taking a pony ride to a certain distance in case you want to take that route. But it's very doable, and we've had actually very few people, only the ones who've had serious health issues, not choose to go on top. But most of our visitors, most of our travelers who come, make it all the way up to the top.
That's great to hear, Conan. Thank you. 5 hours is a lot of climbing. How long do you actually spend up top on the Tiger's Nest when you?
So especially like when we are at the Tiger's Nest, I mean, like we spend about like half an hour at the max. So especially like getting there, catching breath. We spend some time, I mean, especially like going around the temple, because at the Tiger's Nest, I mean, like it's just not the one temple. We have about series of temple just inside the complex. So we visit a couple of temples within. So that actually gives us more time to catch our breath and free burst ourselves. So we stay like about 45 to an hour up there.
Yeah, and I also think Tiger's Nest is a beautiful case example of the journey being much more interesting than the destination itself.
All right. Now, when I come to visit you guys, are there going to be significant cultural festivals where tourists are actually welcomed? Will those occur during the trip?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I mean, like especially like the most of the festivals, which we call it the Techu, which takes place in and around the 10th day of the 10th month, as we follow the lunar calendar. So especially like if your travel date matches with the festival dates, absolutely yes, we are allowed to visit the festivals to witness some of the religious the carnival in Bhutan. So that's actually it's actually one of the best time to be here. We have like the beautiful colors. I mean, all the people, they would come in their finest dress. So it's very bright and beautiful.
Yeah, also I just want to add that, sorry, almost always on a trip, we're there at a weekend. And weekends itself, I think, are very festive because there's always an archery tournament or two. There's darts tournament happening. Of course, all the rice, wine, and everything that happens in the background. And this is usually the way it's timed. It's usually at the end of the trip. So just a couple of days before you fly out, we always encounter a small celebration, if not a big one, happening at some point during the journey, which we'll always pull over to the side and sort of join in and get involved with the festivities.
Boy, it sounds like such a wonderful and fascinating place. Boy, I wish we had more time to ask questions, but I'm afraid that's about all the time we have left for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you, Conan, to see if you have any final words.
Sure, I would just like to say that it is certainly a unique experience, and this is all for you who are thinking about traveling to Bhutan. It's truly a unique thing to be experienced. It's a country like no other, and for those of you who wanted to take this virtual journey with us, I'd just like to say thank you, and see you on the other side of the pond sometime, hopefully when the country opens back up again. Dorji, you want to sign off and add anything?
Thank you very much, everyone. Please do visit us and experience the magic with us. It's a small country, but I mean, our hearts are very big. And I mean, like, we would love to see you guys here in our tiny kingdom in Himalayas. And I would like to apologize for the series of problems. I mean, I think my son, he is sick. So because of that reason, there was a lot of disturbance. Hope you will understand. Tashidele.
Thank you, Dorji. It was a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Dorji, Conan, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in. Please join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineups, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available soon on our website. With that, I will conclude the webinar for today. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.